Hey, I'm Brad Aycock with Krone. Today I want to talk about a little bit about our Krone hay, 3-point hay mowers, and then I want to get a little more in depth with the AMR series. First of all, I'd like to go through the common elements amongst all our cutters. All right, when I talk about 3-point disc mowers, I like to focus a lot on the Cutterbar. The Cutterbar is our bread and butter. It's what sets us apart from the competition. We have a lot of commonality between all of our machines, whether it be 3-point mowers, mower conditioners. We have a lot of commonality between them, and I want to show you some of it. So we run a single loaded pinion design inside the Cutterbar. We run one solid Cutterbar, so it's not segmented. It's one solid piece in an oil bath. We have the Safe Cut shear protection. We also have the QuickChange blade system. And I'd like to go in a little more in depth on each of the series, so you'll kind of see what separates the series apart, but I want you to understand that that comes standard with all of our Krone machines. So when I'm explaining in particular the AMR series 3-point mower, I'd like to focus first on the Cutterbar. That's where the rubber meets the road. That is the most important part of the machine and the most expensive part of the machine, and that's what sets us apart from all of our competition. So this is a cutaway. It's a slice of the Cutterbar, and I want you to see what it's made up of. All right. The part that I talked about earlier, the fully welded Cutterbar, is actually this piece right here. Okay, that is fully welded. It's not segmented. It's not a shaft drive in there. It's gear drive in there. I've got one of the gears behind me. I'll show you in a minute. But this part is the Cutterbar, and the rest of this is a piece of the skid shoe that protects the Cutterbar. Remember, the Cutterbar is our most expensive, the most important piece, so we want to protect it. Like I said, we're a fully welded Cutterbar, and we're gear drive inside, so we're direct drive. So what I want to show you is how these gears, they fit inside the Cutterbar. And we run a single loaded pinion design, and I want to go through that more in depth here at the Cutterbar. So what I want to show you, the single loaded pinion design on our gear drive Cutterbar. These are the large spur gears inside here. All right, so every time you see one of these bushings, they actually fit inside the gear. And if you look on the Cutterbar here, you'll see these bushings all the way throughout. So actually the spur gears are sitting down in there. And then we run a single loaded satellite pinion design. So what I mean by satellite pinion is the big spur gears here on the outside are transferring the power, and the pinions run off the side of the spur gears. So that means we can pull a whole pinion section out and the Cutterbar will still turn. So it's a single loaded pinion design. Back to our cutaway of the Cutterbar. Remember I said our spur gear slides in here? This is a section of our Cutterbar. This is the skid shoe. What I'd like to show you is the whole unit sitting here and how we protect the most important part of the machine. Now what we have on the Cutterbar itself, we have the skid shoe here, the Cutterbar here, and then a couple of different pieces on the welded on it. All right, the skid shoe is actually bolted on. These skid shoe run the full length of the Cutterbar. A lot of the competition, that'll be a T design, it'll be strips, it'll be just a front little section, but it's actually, on ours, it actually protects the Cutterbar all the way to the rear. It also protects the front, flush with the front. And if you look at the back, we're fully protected sticking way out the back. Competition will say, well, you know, why do you need so much sticking out the back? Well, we need that, so if you go over a stump, you jump over it right here. Now if it falls down the back and you're not protected, you've hit the disc on the back of it, tearing up something inside the Cutterbar. People will ask about from time to time, is these pieces on the front, they'll say they're dirt protectors, they're all different kind of things, but they actually serve one purpose, is when you're going through the field, you're mowing, your blade's coming around, and you hit something, your blade is going to do one of two things. It's either going to bend up, and your cut quality goes down, or it bends down. That's the worst case scenario. All right, say you hit something, it bends down. The disc keeps spinning. You hit it. This blade is trying to dig in the very expensive Cutterbar. All right, what we want to do, and what this piece is designed for, is to bend this blade back up out of the way. And that's exactly what it does. The next thing I want to talk about in our Cutterbar is our Safe Cut shear pin design. So each hub has pins inside of it. these two pins. They come in from either side, and it's actually double pins. And what they do is when you hit something, they immediately shear. Now, the hub has reverse threads based upon the way it's spinning, the orientation in which it's spinning. So what will happen, the hub stops instantly. The hub is what I mean the disc, and the hub attached to it stops instantly because you hit something. The cutter bar continues to turn because the tractor PTO is still turning. Our internal big gears are still turning. We instantly shear these pins, and then the hub will run up on the reverse threads against a snap ring inside here. Now I'm going to show you how to get to them and replace them. So we'd loosen the bolts up, 4 bolts. I've already got them loose. Pull them out of there. Take our cover off. Take our disc off. Here's our spring plate. The spring plate, if you look at it, is actually bent up on either end. You can see it when it's sitting flat. Bent up right there and up right here. That bend is what actually holds the knife against the knife pin right here on the bottom of the disc. That's what I put my tool between. Put the tool right in here, bend it down. That's how I take the knife off. All right. So the pins that we sheared, we hit something hard enough to stop the disc. All right. So the disc and this part right here that I'm touching, the top of the hub, actually stopped immediately. The pinion, the inside right here that I'm touching now, it continues to spin because remember our big spur gears are right here. They're continuing to spin because the tractor PTO is continuing to spin. All right, we hit something, we immediately sheared these pins. All right, this has reverse threads, the pinion does, and this piece acts as a puller. The puller immediately runs up the threads and against this snap ring. So the whole hub and everything is up out of the way. The hub and disc are up out of the way, so the neighboring discs that are still spinning don't beat it to death. We've hit something hard enough in the field to shear the hub. Usually, I'll tell this to all the customers, sticks and normal debris will not shear a hub. What shears the hubs are heavy stuff, wellheads, chunks of concrete. Those are what shears hubs. Okay, nevertheless, our hub is sheared, but the first thing we got to have is a tool to take that puller on the top of it off. The tool is going to be in our little toolbox here under the headstock. A little green piece, 1/2 inch drive, looks like a wrench. We've sheared the hub. What will happen here is the puller, that's this part that I'm talking about here, will be up against the snap ring. So the thing I like to do is just take the snap ring off of it, knock my pieces of pin out, because I'm going to have pieces that are inside the pinion and the piece that is in the hub part. This whole thing will just pull off. You'll have the piece of the hub sticking out, or the pinion shaft sticking out, knock your pieces of roll pin out of it, and then we go to tighten it back up. So we put it back on there, put our snap ring on it. This is where our tool that we got earlier comes into play. We put our tool on the back side of it there. Take our 1/2 inch ratchet, tighten it down, and it'll be like one time they won't line up and the next time they will, and you'll never make it to the next time because they're so tight. And then when you put your pins in there, you'll put the pins. They come assembled already. The C's are backwards, one's pointing that way, one's pointing that way. Hammer them in till they're flush on each side. Now what that does leave is there's a little void right in the middle of the pinion right there. All right, that void is there. And that's the reason we use 4 instead of 1 long one or 2 long ones. That void is there, so when you hit something, the pins instantly shear. They don't bend. If it was 1 pin, they would tend to bend. The little short ones with the void, they actually move together just a little bit, and that's what gives you that crisp shearing effect. One of the other big features that comes standard with Krone machines are QuickChange blades. A lot of the competition will offer it, but offer it as an option and a very expensive option. So I'm going to change one of the blades on it. Our tool, QuickChange tool, will be on this side of the headstock. It's locked in. Pull it out. I'm going to flip this blade over since our blades are reversible. All right, so I'm going to push the tool in the side. There's a spring plate right in here and the disc right here. So I go between those two pieces with the tool, make sure the tool comes out the other side. And it always seems to be a little bit easier to change over the hole in the skid shoe. So I center it over the hole. I push down with my right hand. Now I can take my blade out, flip it around because it is reversible. Put it back on. Remember to take the tool out and always store it on the side of the headstock so you don't lose it. I want to talk about this little tool you'll find in the toolbox. It'll be a tool that checks the knife pin wear and the spring plate wear, and I'll show you how to use it here. We'll pull the blade off and I'll put the tool in there and show you how to use it up close. So we got our tool off our headstock. We slide it between the spring plate and the disc. Slides out the other side over the hole in the skid shoe. Push down. Pull our knife off. All right, take our tool out of there. So this little gauge right here where my index finger is, I'm going to try to slide it on the knife pin. If you see, it will not slide up on there. So if it slides on the knife pin, then you know that the knife pin needs to be replaced. The other part of the tool is this part that I'm touching with my thumb, the built up part. That's going to check the slop in the spring plate. You can see we're pretty tight there. The slop in the spring plate, and if your spring plate is wore way beyond that, way back into here, then you need to change the spring plate. The thinner the cutter bar, the better, because remember, all you want to do is cut the crop and lay it over. We're not trying to pick it up, we're not trying to do anything spectacular with it, we just want to cut it and lay it down. A lot of the competition out there, their cutter bars are really, really thick, so to get a really close cut, they have to angle that cutter bar way, way over. And when you angle a cutter bar way over, you know you have a chance of digging in the ground and hitting a lot of stumps and whatnot. Just by looking at it, inch and a half, inch and 3/4, rough estimate there. The biggest sales feature that is missed is you don't have to get off the tractor to fold the tarp back to fold the machine up. And that makes a really, really big difference for a guy, especially in my area, that's going around cutting 4 or 5 small fields in one day. He's on and off the tractor all the time trying to fold and unfold because he's got to mess with a tarp. Make sure your PTO is off, pull the cord, hit your hydraulic remote, fold it up. No need to get off the tractor. One of our other really good features about Krone disc mowers, when you have it folded up in transport position, the machines fold over 90 degrees. They fold over to 100 degrees on our AMR 200, 240, 280, and 320. And on the 360, the longer one, the 11-foot 10-inch, they fold to 110 degrees. This accomplishes 3 different things. The first thing is it makes you a little bit lower going down the road because you're not straight up at 90 degrees. The second thing is it centers that weight of the cutter bar on the 3-point hitch of the tractor, so it's not on the right rear tire. The other thing is you can now see out your right mirror instead of just looking at curtain and cutter bar going down the road. I talked about when I was doing cutter bar stuff, but you couldn't see, was the full length skid shoe. So like I said earlier, a lot of the competition out there will have T skid shoes. They'll have a little piece of a skid shoe or just a skid shoe that mounts on the front. Our skid shoe runs the full length of the cutter bar, protecting it front and rear. And you see it's got holes in it, so if we do need to take gears out for whatever reason, we can knock those out and pull our bolts out the bottom. All right, so I'm going to start at the front part of our support system or our headstock. You can see that this machine is oriented category 2 right here, our outside hitch pins, category 2, and we're category 2 on top right here. If for whatever reason you want to put it on a category 1, you can turn the pins around, loosen this up. There's your category 1 pin there. There's your category 1 pin. Turn them to the outside, and on the top link, you can swap it around. There's your category 1 there. All right, working our way down. You see the first thing is our toolbox here. So it's up under the headstock right here. Handy dandy little toolbox. Inside the toolbox, you got a bunch of different stuff. You'll have the knives, left and right knives. You'll have the gauge to check the spring plate and the knife pin. You'll have your safe cut tool, wrench to tighten it up. And you'll have a couple of sets of pins on the inside here. There's a couple of sets inside there. Also, what's pretty handy is the part numbers are listed for the blades. The part numbers are listed on the box. All right. We got our manuals, of course, here. A lot of times people leave them in there and they might get wet, but always take them out. You have your QuickChange tool on the side. Here's where it's housed. Pull up, Tool comes out, you go change your blades, swap them around, whatever you need to do. But make sure when you put it back in there, it's down and latched. If it's not latched, it'll rattle out. All right, the springs. The first thing you'll notice are the two compensation springs, the larger ones. Those are for the outer end of the cutter bar, of the outer 2/3. That's what holds your flotation out there. The little one here is for your inner third, okay, or the heel of the cutter bar. So when you get this machine in the field and you're running, you want between 50 and 70 pounds. You'll be able to lift it out there on the outer end. You also don't want the machine to be too heavy. You don't want it to be too light. So if you're too heavy, it's got a bunch of negative effects. First being you're going to drag up mud. You're going to be tough on the grass. Secondly, you're going to be tough on the tractor. You're going to be tough on the cutter, dragging it through the field. And it's just not good to be way, way too heavy in the field. Now, this machine as it sits right now is way, way heavy. There's absolutely no spring tension on it. You can see it can move it. All right, the way to set the spring tension and tighten it up, you see these pins right here. All right, these pins you can pull out and then move this green piece. So I'll pull one out. I'll do this one so you can see better. Take the green piece off and notice all the holes. Okay, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes that I can put it in. All right, so the further I go this way, the tighter the spring is going to be, so the more flotation. The further I go this way, the longer the spring is going to be, so the less flotation, okay? So let's put it somewhere, we'll go from either end and see. So I'm going to put it back in the original hole. Now what would happen, all right? Now what would happen when I fold the machine up, this little edge right here will fall over this, okay? And it'll lock in. When it locks in, that spring will be tight, okay? When I have it up like this, that's the parking position, okay? So when I set my 3-point down and set the mower down, everything will rest flat. It's in the parking position. So spring down, operating position. After I fold the mower up, get it to latch right here and here, set it down, the springs will tighten up, be in working position, operating position, fold it back up, flip these green handles up, we'll be in the park position, then I can set the machine flat down the ground and unhook it. To tighten and loosen the springs, I'm going to pull one out. Say I'm too heavy on my flotation, I'm going to go right here. So that means over here the cutter bar was too light. I'm going to do them both at the same time. That's the way you do them. Okay. So here the cutter bar was too light. I ran over heel. I started skipping a whole bunch and then it settled back down. Now I put it in these holes. I made the distance between here and here a little bit greater so I have less spring tension on it. So now my cutter bar is staying on the ground. But remember, when I'm down like this, it's no flotation until I raise the mower up, get these hooks to hook over the latch, and then set it back down. All right, the other thing that I want to mention is, of course, I said earlier that all Krones are direct drive, no belts. In this case, we run from the tractor through a PTO. We have a friction disc clutch right in here, overload protection. We run through a right angle gearbox right here. This particular model, the AMs, the AMR series, the AM2, that goes through the mainframe. The drive line is through the mainframe to a right angle gearbox. And inside that gearbox is an overrunning clutch. So what happens on most of the newer tractors these days, there is a PTO brake. So when you kill your PTO, it wants to stop everything instantly. It tries to. Well, the cutter bar has a lot of momentum in it, so we don't want everything to try to come to a stop and overload it in the wrong direction. So what our overrunning clutch does, it allows the machine to coast down. So you'll go from a full 540, turn your PTO off, and you'll hear a clicking as your cutter bar coasts down. All right, so we're coming, the power transfer is coming through the mainframe into the gearbox and then through the cutter bar. And that's going to be common amongst all our machines. Now, the way we transfer the power, this one's in particular is through the frame. It'll be a little bit different amongst our premium line of cutters, the ECR line of cutters. But there again, it is a direct drive, no belts. All right, the other few things that I want to mention on our support system, our hydraulic system, our little string here, what it's for. We have a shut-off valve, a little green piece, and the safety breakaway. So let's start out with what I've got in my hand. It's a string that goes up to the cab. All right, you see it goes all the way up inside the cab. And what it does, when you pull it, it moves a little green piece, a little green flapper down there. All right? What that is a flap. When you hit your hydraulic remote and fold up, it's going to fold the machine up till it hits that flap. So you'll be at a 45. Your cutter bar will be at a 45 so you can make your headland turns. That flap prevents you to going all the way up at 90 and putting your drive line at an odd angle. So it makes you think to turn off the PTO before you fold it all the way up. All right. Hydraulic hose, we only have one connection. All right. Single acting cylinder with a shutoff right here. So we hit the remote, add oil into the system, the machine comes up. Ideally, you want this system to be on a remote that has a float or a zero return. So when you push it into float, it goes all the way down and all your weight will be on the springs. Never really want the weight to be on the hydraulic system of the tractor or on the cylinder, trying to work it back and forth. You want it to be on the springs. The other thing here, this bar, that bar there, that's kind of a gauge to raise your 3-point height up. It's got a little arrow on it that we can see up close here in a minute that line this pin up with the arrow, and that's what gets your 3-point height set. The safety breakaway, this machine, this bar right here, the safety breakaway is between the side of the headstock and the mainframe there, and it's going to break the cutter bar straight back. To reset it, you'd leave it on the ground and back up, and you'd hear it click to reset. And if you notice, the gearbox on our machines are directly behind the first drum. So a lot of people, or a lot of the competition, will have the gearbox off to one side, and they have to run some kind of inner shoe or something to deflect the cut crop inside there from wrapping. So we run right behind the gearbox and kind of don't need anything there. All right, so what I want to talk about here is the spring tension. I mentioned it earlier, the compensation springs that hold the outer end. I wanted to show you how they hold the flotation and how to put it on park so you can unhook the machine very easily. All right, so right now, you see both springs are down over the latches. So that means when I push the machine down, the latches are going to hold right here, the springs are going to get tight, and then you have the flotation on the outer 2/3 of the cutter bar. All right. In the park position, so right now we've got it folded up, that's where you change your springs all the time. So if I wanted to unhook the machine, I would get off the tractor, fold these back where they're up like this. Now that when I set the machine down, the pins will slide, the springs will slide on the pins all the way up in the slots, and there won't be any spring tension at all, and you can unhook the machine very easily. One of the last things I wanted to show you, this pretty unique feature to this machine, it's got an adjustable hydraulic restrictor on your hydraulic flow to your tractor. So remember, this is a single acting cylinder. So we're just going to force oil into the cylinder when we raise the machine up, and gravity is going to allow the machine to go back down. So remember, we always want to run this machine in float. So a lot of people will just push their hydraulic remote directly into float. So if you have no restriction on it, the cutter bar will fall immediately. So you need to have some restriction. We actually have an adjustable hydraulic restrictor. It's right behind our shutoff valve. Pull the little black cap off. There's a jam nut on here. Loosen the jam nut, get you an Allen wrench. If you turn it all the way in, you'll have no flow. Back off just a little bit, and you can adjust your flow rate. That'll let your cutter bar down easy instead of hitting the ground. All right, one of the last features I want to show you is pretty unique to this particular machine, the AMR series or the AM2. And it deals with a safety breakaway, but not exactly in the safety breakaway function. So there's a pin that connects the safety breakaway right here to the mainframe of between the mainframe and the headstock. And a pretty unique feature of this is if you pull this pin out, this whole machine will swivel around to the rear. And a lot of people use that for storage, to back into a spot in the barn to store during the winter or whatnot. But you can back it in just a narrow spot and then unhook it. But what you want to do, make sure your springs are unhooked, your spring tension's off of it like we have here. And also, you see, I notice I got my PTO laying down, so we've got to unhook the PTO from the tractor because the whole thing's going to swivel. So I just got mine laying on the ground, or you can take the PTO completely off. All right, this is the pin that connects the safety breakaway between the 3-point frame and the main headstock. Now I'm going to pull this pin out. Cutter bar is on the ground. My PTO is unhooked. You can actually take the PTO off of it, and there's no spring tension on it. So I'm going to pull it out. Okay. I got it loose there. Now what we'll do is we'll hydraulically raise the machine up a little bit, and it's usually good for this to be somebody helping you because there's nothing going to be holding the cutter bar from swinging back and forth. So I'm going to raise it up just a little bit, and then once we get it to a level position, then I'm going to swing the cutter bar directly behind the tractor. That way we could back it into a parking space, a little narrow space in the barn. It won't take up a whole lot of room. I got my PTO undone, got my safety breakaway undone, so the cutter bar is free. It's just kind of jammed in there right now. I raised it up hydraulically, and I raised my 3-point up. Now I'm going to push it around to the rear a little bit, and we should just swivel right around. All right, now we've got everything swung to the rear, nothing bound up on it or anything. We've got everything unhooked that we needed to unhook up there. Now I would probably get somebody to hold this while you guided it. Somebody drove it and let them guide it back into the spot in the barn they want. Then the next step would be to hit your hydraulic remote, let the cutter bar down, and then let your 3-point down all the way to the ground, and you can unhook. And to hook it back up, it's just as simple. Hook it up, get somebody to hold it, hit your hydraulic remote, raise it up, pull it straight out, and then swing it back around and hook up the breakaway.